but now the interior of your car is a public space. Can homeless people now live in your car in Minnesota when it's parked on a public street? Ed, the Minnesota Supreme Court says the interior of your vehicle is a public place when it comes down to whether or not you can carry a gun in your vehicle without a permit. And in the case that this came up on, it wasn't even a real gun. It was a BB gun. So I don't know what's going on in Minnesota, but this is getting kind of crazy.
It feels to me like this is one of those circumstances in which very anti-gun people in various levels of government are just going to do whatever they can to make it okay to do whatever law enforcement's got to do to take care of those bad gun people. But I think they may have stepped in at this time. Yeah,
and again, we go back to this. We've talked about this for a while. The Bruin case was not the end. It is just the beginning of all sorts of craziness at the state level. But the Supreme Court in Minnesota, the Minnesota State Supreme Court, ruled that the interior of your vehicle is a public place and you can't carry a gun in a public place without a permit in the state of Minnesota. And this is a 3-year case that has worked its way through the district or the circuit court, the Court of Appeals, the state Supreme Court. And I think it opens up just a tremendous can of worms.
Oh,
now,
you think so?
Yeah.
You think it might?
And because Minnesota does not have a castle doctrine law per se, like Wisconsin has a castle doctrine. You can defend yourself in your home or your car or however that works when you're inside that vehicle. But Minnesota also has a duty to retreat, which means you can only use deadly force as a last resort there in Minnesota. But now the interior of your car is a public space, and I have the right to be in public where I want. It's a public space. I get to be there. So does that mean I now get to be in your car and you have to retreat as a last resort? Can homeless people now live in your car in Minnesota when it's parked on a public street?
Well, and that, like I said, I think they might have stepped in at this time. That's exactly the kind of question that this is going to bring up. How about Terry stops? Remember those from the academy?
Oh, yeah.
Ohio v. Terry, 1968, was the case that wound up going to the Supreme Court that wound up establishing essentially stop and frisk,
right?
Which is something that a lot of people thought was a really terrible idea. But the nuts and bolts of stop and frisk is what? You and I are on duty. We're walking along. Take it from here.
Yeah. Do we have a reasonable suspicion? Is a crime about to happen or is it happening? Then we can stop and we can search. It is a pat down. We can't do an in-depth search, but it's a pat down. So yeah, how does this apply now to Terry stops? How, if a cop pulls you over, does he have now in Minnesota the right to look anywhere in your vehicle? Because this gun was underneath the seat. It was not, I guess you could argue that it was in the lunge area if you're getting, really technical about this.
And the BB gun was under the seat of the vehicle. I didn't read anything about search incident to arrest.
Yep.
But Terry stops are only acceptable in public.
Right.
Right. I can't go snooping around and look through somebody's skylight and think, hey, maybe he looks like he might have a gun when he's not supposed to, and then knock on their door and come in and do a Terry stop. Yeah. Terry stops were about in public. I spot somebody, he keeps pulling at that one part on his waistband. I think he's got a gun. I'm going to go pat him down.
Yeah.
And now if the inside of your car is public?
I understand that not all of these cases happen surrounding the most savory individuals. The person was suspected of stealing catalytic converters. Okay, so we got that going on now, but that does not give law enforcement blanket search abilities now. Well, apparently it does in Minnesota that interior of your car is a public place. So you have to have a permit to have a firearm, but it wasn't a firearm. It was a BB gun. Well, maybe it looked like a BB gun. I know you can't have fake firearms at the airport and things like that. So I'm not 100% up to speed on Minnesota law as what constitutes a firearm, but
I'm not up to speed on how this wasn't covered by search incident to arrest. If they'd pulled him over on suspicion of stealing catalytic converters, and then they found something under the seat of his vehicle in the lunge area, et cetera, how did this get to the state Supreme Court? I would like any attorneys to chime in down below.
Yeah. Because
so far, the way that report would normally get written was, we pulled him over because he matched the description of someone who had been stealing catalytic converters. We asked him to exit the vehicle. Search incident to arrest because he had a pile of catalytic converters in the back seat, whatever. Search incident to arrest. We found this under the seat of the vehicle, so here's how we got here.
Yeah.
That would be very cut and dried, but that's apparently not what this is.
Well, I think what bounced this up is now that gave him an extra charge. And the additional charge, he's like, wait a minute, it's legal for me to have this in my vehicle. And they said, no, it's not, because you didn't have a permit. Well, again, it's a BB gun, not a firearm, and we need to find out what the exact definition of that is. And now if they're calling the interior of your vehicle on a public roadway a public place, does that open up all the rest of this garbage for, I don't have to leave a public place if I have a right to be there. So does that make the interior of your vehicle? Can I sit down in your vehicle on a public street in Minnesota and give you my testimony? And,
I don't think that's written into the law, but I think in practice, yeah, they're allowed to do that.
And this just opens up this gigantic can of worms of when and where do you get to defend yourself? And when and where do you get to possess a firearm? Yes, states get to make those laws. They will make those laws. We will argue if they are good or bad laws all over the place. We understand that states get to make laws. And then this has to go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I think it almost certainly will.
I mean, it's changing the definition of public spaces and what people get to do in public spaces, because apparently some people just don't like guns.
Interesting times.
Hey, before you go, let me ask you, are you breaking these gun laws without even knowing it? Get a free concealed carry map that reveals the gun laws in your state and the states you might be traveling to. Click the link in the description below to check it out.